This is Dear Strategy, episode 148. Welcome to another episode of Dear Strategy, where we answer all of your questions about product, business, and personal strategy. I'm your host, Bob Caparelli. This is episode 148, being recorded in June of 2024. Welcome back, strategy creators, to another great episode. This is going to be an episode where we continue on talking about some strategy lessons. I kind of go back and forth between talking about real life rants about company strategy and things like that, share some experiences from my classes, training, workshops, things like that. But then I also like to share some lessons, some of the things that I cover in some of the workshops and training and things of that nature. And so I've been doing that for the last few episodes. As you know, I record a bunch of these episodes back to back and then release them, every 2 weeks or so. So, that's just my cadence. So I'm on a roll of kind of strategy lessons. I'm going to continue on with that. And a subject I have been wanting to talk about for some period of time, which has to do with two things. A couple of episodes ago, in episode 146, I think it was, I talked about, standard strategic theories and, how sometimes they get evolved for reasons that are not always useful. And I referenced this thing that many of you probably have heard of called the PEST analysis, which has been evolved into a PESTEL analysis, which I then evolved into a pectin analysis. Not to excuse myself for falling into the trap of just evolving things for the sake of evolving it. There's actually a reason I did that, and I did want to explain what that is on this episode. But before we get to any of that, I need to first talk about the definitions between industries and markets, and that's something that I do want to cover here because it talks directly into the PESTEL analysis and why I made a modification to it. So that's kind of what this whole episode is going to be about. So let's just jump right into it and talk about these two definitions, industries and markets. And what I find is when I go into most companies, and keep in mind that most of the work I do is with business to business companies. Now, I do work with business to consumer companies, CPG type companies sometimes, but my area of expertise, my background, the majority of clients that I have are more in that business to business environment. And it's very common in those environments to mix these two terms up, right? The kind of industries and markets are referring to the same thing. So if I ask someone to do a market analysis, they're going to kind of do the same thing as if they did an industry analysis. They interchange those terms. And in reality, those two terms are different. So getting into that a little bit, when we refer to markets, it's kind of short for marketplaces, right? And marketplaces is where customers go to transact business, is where they go to purchase goods. And so in a typical marketplace, a group of customers are going to buy stuff from some manufacturer, suppliers, something, right? That becomes a marketplace. And so when we refer to markets in business terms, we're typically referring to that group of customers because they're the ones that are going to the marketplace to transact business. So even though they're transacting business with suppliers or companies, the markets are made up of customers. Without those customers, there would be no marketplace, right? So that's kind of the thought process. So when we talk about markets, market segmentation, we're really talking about groups of customers that go to transact business somewhere. Now, when we talk about industries, we're really talking about a group of suppliers or companies who are supplying marketplaces with goods and services, right? And that kind of makes sense. You think about industry, industrial kind of environment, you're talking about manufacturing, you're talking about people who are supplying some products or services into a marketplace. So the shorthand version of all that is when we refer to markets, we're talking about groups of customers. When we refer to industries, we're talking about groups of companies, okay? And because industries are grouped by similar companies providing similar goods and services, then we can say that industries refer to a group of competitors and markets refer to a group of customers. Now, that's not always so clean, right? Because especially on the industry side of things, those competitors, quote unquote, may not be direct competitors, right? Take the automotive industry. I have people that are, providing vehicles, and then we have people that are providing components to those people that are providing vehicles. So those component suppliers wouldn't necessarily be referred to as competitors of the vehicle suppliers. So depending on how broad you want to define your industry, it's not all going to be direct competitors, but by and large, industries are grouped based on similar companies providing similar goods and services. So you can think about that in terms of competition. Now, why is that important? Well, when we do our strategic analysis, we have three areas that we analyze, often referred to as the 3 C's of business, right? So you have companies, you have competitors, and you have customers. In this terminology, company is referred to as yourself, right? So you want to do an analysis on you, your performance, your capabilities, your strengths, your weaknesses, so forth. Customers is, the people that you are supplying goods and services to. And competitors are the people that are competing for that same business with those same customers, either now or in the future, right? So those are the 3 kind of areas that you analyze for strategic purposes. So if we kind of put all this together, we can say when we are doing the customer part of the analysis, we're really analyzing our markets, right? And when we're doing the competitor part of the analysis, we're really analyzing our industries. And the way that I look at this is when I think about a market analysis versus a customer analysis, I think of the market analysis being the broad place that I'm playing, right? So the broad grouping of customers that I could possibly supply to. And then my customer analysis is the more specific groupings of customers that exist within that marketplace. And then similarly, on the competitive side, when I think about an industry analysis, I'm thinking about the broad macro level trends that affect the industry that I'm a part of. And then when I do the competitor analysis, I'm breaking that down into the specific competitors that I am competing with within that industry, right? So hopefully that kind of lays out and all makes sense. Now, it's worth noting why these 2 things get kind of intertangled. And that's because, especially in the business to business world, when you are supplying to markets or groups of customers, because it's business to business, those groups of customers that you are supplying to are industries, right? So if I am a supplier of business to business services or goods, it would not be uncommon for me to say I'm supplying goods into the automotive industry, meaning people that are in the automotive industry are part of my customer base. And in that case, we typically refer to those industries that are our customers, we refer to those as vertical markets, right? Automotive, oil and gas, petrochem, food and beverage, things like that, because our customers are part of industries. So that's kind of how these things get convoluted. Now, I'm sure there's different interpretations of this in this kind of business consulting world. I never like to say there's one right and one wrong, but this is the lens that I certainly look at it through. And I think this is kind of the standard definitions that you might find. Okay, so why is that important? And why does that kind of relate to this PESTEL analysis? So as I explained a couple of episodes ago, one way to analyze your business environment is by doing what's called a PEST or a PESTEL analysis. So this kind of derived from a book. It was written in 1967 by a guy named Francis Aguilar. And he wrote a book called Scanning the Business Environment. And when you're looking at the business environment that you're a part of and that you're supplying goods and services into, you can analyze the macro trends of that industry in 4 basic categories. And those categories are political, economic, social, and technological. So these are the big trends that could affect your business. And of course, those categories, form to spell out PEST. So that became a very common terminology for the type of macro trend analysis you would do for your business. And that evolved over the years into what's referred to as a PESTEL analysis. So just basically added 2 categories of legal, which is kind of the policy and regulatory things, and environmental, which is not necessarily the environment, like, we think of green and things like that. It's more kind of the environmental factors that, are kind of out of your control, like things like COVID, right? That would be an example of an environmental factor, something that happens within the environment that you play in that, that maybe you don't have any control over. So that's my interpretation. Anyway, that's what that generally stands for. So that's PESTEL. And that is a way to look at the macro trends of the business that you are a part of. And you can see by those categories that they overlap both the industry and market piece, right? There are elements like economic and social that kind of talk more to the market side of things. And then there's things like political and the, legal part of things and whatever else that kind of talk more to the industry part. And so it is a way of doing a macro trend analysis for your entire business without necessarily focusing on market or industry specifically. And so what I like to do when I'm doing a strategic analysis is for my markets, I like to look at trends that are affecting my markets. And those trends are all centered around customer needs, right? So whatever's happening in the marketplace, how does that translate into what customers will ultimately need from their suppliers? And that becomes the macro trends of the marketplace. When I'm doing an industry analysis, I like to look at the macro trends that are affecting my company and the competitive landscape that I'm a part of kind of equally. So the idea is if there's some regulatory things coming down the pipe or some legal pieces coming down, if I could address those things before my competitors or differently than my competitors, then that could give me a strategic advantage. So I really always liked to use PESTEL analysis more in relation to the industry part of the analysis, kind of the trends that are affecting my industry that would affect me and my competitors the same way. But when you look at PESTEL as the way to analyze that, again, there's too many factors that kind of overlap with the macro trends of the marketplaces. Example, the social factor, right? Social is really about the social factors that customers are creating, like what society looks like. And that's really kind of around customer trends and customer preferences and things like that, which in my world is already accounted for in my market analysis. So, kind of putting that into the industry analysis didn't make sense for me. So that's why I evolved the PESTEL analysis into a pectin analysis, which is what I refer to. Now, why pectin? Well, there's actually a little story behind it. This was something, of course, I was looking for something to replace PESTEL with. And it was during the time of COVID and there was really nothing to do. And so what activities did we do with our family? We did outdoor activities as much as possible, I guess you're supposed to do. And so we picked berries, found ourselves picking more berries than we could ever use. And so what do we do with those berries? We made jams and jellies out of them. And what do you use to make jams and jellies? Those fellow jam and jelly makers, we use pectin. So this was kind of the inspiration, but more to the point, yes, that was a little kitschy way of me kind of having fun with it, but it actually did also fit my needs because if we just analyze the PESTEL analysis, the P in that, political, to me, that was too broad, right? That could be the political landscape that affects the markets, the industries, everything else. So I really wanted to say, how does the political landscape affect the industry that we're a part of? Well, it has to do with the laws and regulations and things that they would impose on the industries. And so I thought policy captured that a little bit better. As far as economic, I just turned that into economy, right? Very similar terms, but I thought economic trends could be either market or industry trends. Economy, I guess, could be as well, but I thought it was a little more pointed to say, how does the economy affect our industry? So that's kind of the thought process there. Social trends, which as we talked about before, is very, very customer centric in its terminology. I wanted to capture what are the trends, social trends, so to speak, that affect companies, things that companies are latching onto, things like Lean or Six Sigma, or, ways that companies want to manage their internal workforce. And so I thought culture was a better indication of that. Technological, I just turned into technology just to simplify it a little bit, but same basic thing. Still, this would focus on the technologies that would be utilized or be accessible by the industry they were a part of. And then the last two letters in this, which is the IN, stands for any other industry trends that weren't captured in the first four categories. And here I was thinking more around kind of Michael Porter's 5 forces analysis. And you could look that up, and we'll cover that in another show, I'm sure. But that really has to do with other things that affect your competitive landscape, like, the suppliers that make up that competitive landscape, and the power of those suppliers, the threats of new entrants, the barriers to entry for new competitors, and other pieces of that as well, which we won't go into here. But I was thinking about any other industry forces that could be acting on your industry that aren't captured in those first 4 categories of policy, economy, culture, or technology. So that was my evolution of this PESTEL analysis into something that was more specific to analyzing industries. Right, wrong, or indifferent. That's where it ended up. So if that helps you and you are using that type of analysis for the same reasons that I suggest using it, which is looking at the trends of your overall competitive landscape, then I think Pectin does a good job at that. That's what I would recommend doing. Again, these things are all a matter of preference, a matter of taste. So use whatever you feel comfortable with, but that's the reasoning I had behind it. So anyway, if you want to learn more about this, please get in touch with us. You can visit our website at strategygeneration.com. We offer training and workshops and coaching and consulting. And so, all of these kinds of lessons that we teach on this show, we also talk about in those engagements as well. So please feel free to get in touch. Click on the contact link when you're there. That'll come to me and I'll reach out, have a phone call, and we'll talk about how we might be able to help you. And while you're doing all that, don't forget to make time for the plan. We'll see you back here on another episode of Dear Strategy. Thanks again for joining.